Right. Well, let's move on. Start talking about Afghanistan, where we have, I mean, just kind of a lot of news to cover. But I guess the big news of the day is the U.S. strike in Kabul. So, what's going on there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we have quite a few updates here for Afghanistan. I know you and Connor Freeman on the last show did some great coverage of the bombing outside the Kabul airport. But yeah, there's been quite a bit of stuff that's happened sort of since then and in retaliation for that. Now you mentioned the strike in Kabul. I would like to start. That was actually the second strike. There was a first
Right.
one on Friday. So this is sort of the major news of the last few days are these retaliatory bombings. But yeah, I believe this first one happened in Nangarhar province out in eastern Afghanistan on Friday, specifically in the city of Jalalabad. And initially, the Pentagon had said that they bombed one planner for ISIS-K, what they call the Islamic State Khorasan cell, which we've discussed on a few previous shows. But later, they did update and say that they actually killed two people and wounded another guy. And apparently, all of them, they're saying, are members of ISIS. And of course, at that first strike, they say that there were zero civilian casualties. I think that's yet to be seen, but that is what they're claiming, at least for that first strike. And they did kind of imply that these guys that were hit, that they may have been involved in the airport bombing. But I was watching some of the Pentagon press briefings, and they did stop short of outright saying that. It sounds possible that maybe this was just sort of like a revenge strike on some random ISIS guys that they happen to have some intelligence on. And this is also assuming too that these were actually ISIS guys. Like I think we are kind of taking the Pentagon's word for this, especially because they are refusing right now to identify any of the people who they targeted. But for now, they are saying that these were ISIS, quote, facilitators and planners. And in the briefing, there was some like discussion. I know reporters were trying to get a little more detail on like, what does that mean? What like was this guy a planner for the airport bombing? And the Pentagon would not really specify. They just say these were ISIS planners and they're now dead and they're now off the battlefield.
Well,
Um, oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious. Is there any reporting about if this strike was coordinated with the Taliban and all? Just one situation that you kind of got to realize if you're the U.S. You got a lot of personnel at the Kabul airport there that's going to take, several hours in the best case scenario to get out of the airport. And so I would guess you would want to, make sure you don't do anything to upset the Taliban too much, because I did see today that the Taliban came out and condemned the strike. I guess they could condemn it and at the same time, just kind of shrug their shoulders and not do anything about it, or you have even been forewarned that the strike was going to happen, but you really can't do anything about it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like working with the I know that the General McKenzie, that CENTCOM head, he did say something about how the U.S. had passed some U.S. intelligence to the Taliban, and he says he believes that they thwarted some attacks. But in terms of the drone strike or anything, I'm not sure if there was any like communication about that. Did I understand your question correctly? Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you were
yeah.
asking me?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay, great.
you did. All right. So should we move on to the Kabul strike?
Oh no, I just had a couple other things
Okay,
here.
go ahead.
So for the first one in Jalalabad, they are not saying exactly how the strike was carried out. And this also applies to the second one in Kabul as well. But they're calling these over the horizon operations, which I believe means they launched them from outside of Afghanistan. But the Pentagon spokesman John Kirby would not be any more specific than that. He just kept saying this was an over the horizon mission, and he also wouldn't say what kind of drone was used. And I believe the Reaper drone has like quite a bit more range than the Predator, but I have no clue where they might have launched this from, whether it was maybe Pakistan or I don't know. I was thinking possibly the Al Udeid base in Qatar, but where CENTCOM is headquarters. But that is kind of far away to be hitting Nangarhar, so I'm not totally sure where this was launched from. We do also, I think, have a carrier strike group in the Gulf right now, and I have read some things about them outfitting some of these ships with the ability to launch drones, but I don't know if that's something that they're doing or whether they did it then. But yeah, that is about all I had on the first strike there in Nangarhar.
All
But
right.
did you have anything else on that one, or
No.
just hop right into? Okay,
Yep.
great. So yeah, today actually, the day we're recording, Sunday, there was another U.S. drone strike. This time in Kabul itself, the capital city, and apparently they're saying it was in the Kaji Bugra neighborhood, which is like 2 miles away from the airport. So we're talking like very close to the vicinity of this huge evacuation effort. And they're claiming that the second strike hit a car or a truck that was carrying explosives and linked to the Islamic State. And I don't think they were super specific. They said it could have been a vehicle-borne IED, or maybe it was an ISIS guy with a suicide vest or something. But they are saying that that's what they hit. However, in this case, it does appear that they did kill civilians. CNN had a report. They spoke to one of the brothers of one of the victims, apparently, and he says that 9 members of his family were killed in this strike, and that includes 6 children. And actually, in their announcement, when they announced this strike, CENTCOM even said something about assessing the possibilities of civilian casualties. And I think that's about as close as an official admission as you're going to get at this point. Because you'll recall that after the first strike, they said, like, they're sure 0 civilian casualties, whereas this one they're saying they're assessing the possibility. And so it seems pretty likely that that probably did occur. There were civilians killed in this. You kind of alluded to this earlier, but the Taliban did respond to the second one. I'm not sure if they responded to that first strike, but a spokesman did come out and say something that, like, they should not conduct operations on other people's soil. And he said that we will condemn any strikes like this. And so that was kind of interesting to see them, take a stance against that. Now, Joe Biden did mention that after that first strike, there would be more retaliation after that first strike. And so I guess they did, go through with that. And they are still talking about right now some kind of ongoing threat from ISIS-K. So who knows? By the time people hear this, there may have been, another strike. Now, the last thing I will say, we're supposed to be completely out of Afghanistan now by August 31st. However, all along they have talked about keeping this sort of over-the-horizon presence there, and that is how they're describing these 2 strikes. And so I'm not sure if that, even if we are completely out by August 31st, I'm not sure if that rules out, similar strikes like this going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that all great points, Will, and thanks for the coverage. I guess I don't even have anything to add to that, and other than it, being too early to really speculate on too much else, then I guess one thing I did pick up is the U.S. had I guess warned that there was potentially going to be a car bomb in Kabul. Kind of interesting, I guess, that they don't hit it until it's already in kind of a crowded area. Maybe it came out of a garage in Kabul. I don't know, but it seems like this was a dangerous, high risk airstrike to bomb it in such a crowded area.
Right. Yeah, right in the middle of the capital city.
Yeah. Will, anything else on that or any other Afghan news?
Yeah. I just had there's a couple updates, a couple things just to clarify. Initially, it was reported that in this airport bombing that there was 2 bombs that went off. They'd said one went off by an airport gate and another went off by a hotel that was nearby. However, I believe on Friday the Pentagon came out and said that the second bomb was some kind of false alarm, I guess, that there was actually only one blast. I don't know why or how that people thought there was another bomb or how that got reported so widely, because it was literally everywhere that it was 2 bombings. But at least according now to the official account from the U.S. government, there was only 1 bomber.
Okay.
And then in terms of the sort of death toll, there's all kinds of conflicting numbers that I've seen, but I believe the last figure was 170 Afghans that had been killed. And of those, the Taliban says 28 of those were their own members. I guess some fighters, some could be civilian Taliban members. But then also there's, of course, the 13 American soldiers. And then there were also 2 British nationals, I think, who were killed in this. And so there's been some sort of updates on the death toll.
All right. Well, I got just a couple other stories that I wanted to mention. The U.S. continues to evacuate from Afghanistan. I guess they will probably be doing that for another day here. The U.S. says that they have taken out over 114,000 people. It's not exactly clear to me where all these people are. I'm guessing that a lot of them are living in really, really poor conditions right now, and that this is going to be somewhat of a humanitarian disaster that we're looking at. But I believe this just includes, the U.S. is saying that the U.S. alone flew out 114,000. I think the Brits have put out that they flew out 15,000. I'm not sure, how much other coalition partners did, but Hungary, Australia, Denmark, all these countries had flights out of Afghanistan. So I'm guessing that they're well over 150,000 total were flown out by U.S. coalition forces. The U.S. says there's just over 1,000 civilians that remain at the airport to be flown out. I'm not sure if that means that they're no longer taking new people into Afghanistan. One thing to note, Will, is that the Taliban are saying that anybody who has American citizenship or a foreign national or has, like a travel visa to another country, they're going to allow to leave. And so I'm even wondering now, maybe as some of the traffic has slowed down at the Kabul airport because of a risk of another attack, because of the mob, how many people are down there, how risky that is.
Right.
Maybe they're hoping that the Taliban will just let them leave and they'll be able to get on flights in the weeks and months to come. And so just because we're getting to the end of the U.S. flying people out, I don't think we're at the end of the wave of refugees that we're going to see coming from Afghanistan.
Right.
So just, some interesting notes there I picked up. The Turkey said, who has been securing the Kabul airport, that repairs are needed before civilian flights can begin. So I'm not sure where the damage is. I'm guessing it's not to the runway, so planes could still come in and take off. But they did say damage to the terminals, and I think they also said flight towers, being for some of the reasons that these things would need to be repaired. I guess Turkey is in talks right now with the Taliban on providing the personnel in Afghanistan at the Kabul airport to be able to operate this thing. So my guess, Will, now that I think about this, is that the airport probably has been operated by largely like maybe Western militaries and stuff like that. But to the extent that there were Afghans involved, these are people that were probably heavily tied to the Western military occupation, and were probably some of the first people that left, or will be that, or maybe they're there till the end, but they're going to be evacuated. And so I'm really wondering if the Taliban will need Turkey to bring in this personnel to continue to operate the airport at all. Another interesting story that came out, Will, was that the U.S. had provided the Taliban a list of citizens and then people who they wanted to be able to cross checkpoints and get out of the country. This was really portrayed and tried to use it, be used as fodder against the Biden administration by the Hots, but it does. There I saw a lot of reports of the citizens, like the Western citizens, being able to get through the checkpoints. And so while there may be some downside, and I hope the Biden administration maybe communicated with people and either let them know that they were giving their names to the Taliban, or hopefully preferably said like, hey, we could do this to maybe make it easier, would you like to take that risk? In which case, this is a little bit less offensive and almost understandable. But it does, despite what the Republican talking points have been through all of this, the U.S. has successfully dealt with the Taliban through their takeover of Kabul. Imagine the Taliban have been at war with the U.S. for almost 2 decades, right? And I guess the first couple of years after the U.S. drove them out, there wasn't that much active insurgency and stuff. But we're talking about years and years of war here, Will, and the Taliban could have been real jerks about it and fought until every last American left as soon as possible, and probably could have killed a lot more Americans than the 13 that were killed by the Islamic State bomb. But the U.S. has managed, and one of the things that I think credit has to be given to the Biden administration too is like William Burns has traveled to Afghanistan. They have been kind of ridiculous through all of this, and it's not like they carried out these drone strikes and the Taliban opposed them and stuff like that. I think the U.S. was flying F-16s over Kabul last week as like a show of force. Like, these kind of things have happened, but at the same time, they have engaged in enough diplomacy to kind of make it work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you see some of these hawks like Blinken, the Secretary of State, I think he was on like CBS or something, and it was like, are you saying we're giving the legitimacy to the Taliban? We're negotiating with the Taliban? And he's like, we've been negotiating with the Taliban for like well over a year now. Like, what do you think all the Doha agreements were? Like, yes, of course we're in communication with the Taliban. Like, they're pretty much the government of Kabul now. And I did see a lot of like a huge hawkish reaction of, oh my God, they're giving the Taliban hit lists of Americans to kill. But it seemed that was kind of an overblown reaction. Like, I don't think the Taliban is going to use that to start assassinating Americans trying to get out.
Oh, I mean, it is something to consider as a possibility. And like I said, I hope that, the American side at least let people know that their name was on the list
Right.
at the very minimum. So if the Taliban do start offing people on the list, they know to run.